The scent of candle wax filled the air as midday in New England suddenly transformed into a deep, unnatural night on May 19, 1780. The sky wasn't merely overcast, it was intensely black, compelling people to light candles at noon and livestock to head back to their barns, mistaking it for evening. In Connecticut, lawmakers were forced to adjourn because they could no longer discern each other in the dimness. The official account? It was attributed to forest fires, smoke drifting on peculiar atmospheric currents, a tidy explanation that wraps everything up neatly. Yet for those who dared to dig deeper, the facade of this explanation started to crumble. This phenomenon wasn't confined to New England. Similar accounts of strange atmospheric events, including dark skies and blood-red moons, appeared across continents during the late 18th century, specifically around 1780, 1783. This time frame intriguingly aligns with the mysterious disappearance of Tartaria from the maps, does it not? The accepted story tells us that vast pre-industrial North American fires spewed enough smoke to blanket hundreds of miles, dimming the day before dissipating. A remarkable natural oddity, perhaps, yet not beyond scientific comprehension. But here's what raises eyebrows: the swiftness of the darkness's onset. Eyewitnesses described it as a sudden, enveloping shroud, not a gradual buildup. Timothy Dwight, later to lead Yale, remarked on the darkness's singularity and its unnerving depth. It wasn't the slow drift of smoke or the gathering of clouds, but an abrupt, looming curtain of black. Oddly, the darkness bore a reddish hue along its edges, described by many as brassy or copper-toned, where it met the faint remnants of daylight. That night, the moon emerged like an ominous blood-red orb through the murky haze. Does smoke from burning forests typically behave like this? Having experienced wildfire smoke myself, I've watched skies shift to orange and brown, with ash descending like a surreal snowfall. What we're seeing here, this defies mere atmospheric explanations. Samuel Williams, a Harvard scholar who documented this event, noted its reach extended over 150,000 square miles, far surpassing any logical range for forest fires. Can this simply be a fire-related event? Why cling to that specific narrative? As I unravel this thread, 1780 emerges at the core of a web of other impossibilities. Just a few years earlier, in 1776, America declared its independence, a new nation unfolding, all new narratives forming. Maps were redrawn for new histories, yet 1780 stands out, the dark day when the sky vanished. And here's what history books often omit. 1780 represents a pivotal shift in cartography itself. Changes occurred, not through the usual slow, methodical updates, not through refined surveys or adjusted borders, but something altogether different takes place. I want to start with a number. The gradual disappearance of the word Tartary from the maps of the world tells a story we are seldom told. It didn't vanish overnight, but began to systematically fade from publication after publication, across nations. By the time we stepped into the 1820s, its presence was a mere shadow, almost gone. By 1850, it was as if Tartary had never existed at all. For centuries, European maps bore the name Tartary, or Tartaria, labeling vast expanses of land across Central and Northern Asia. Its presence unchallenged during the medieval ages, surviving the age of exploration, the scientific revolution, and even the Enlightenment. Dutch, French, British, and Russian cartographers all acknowledged its existence. Yet, inexplicably, in the decades after 1776 and significantly post-1780, this name receded from maps, replaced with what the mainstream narrative claims as more precise national and regional identifiers. Territories under the Russian Empire, the Qing dynasty, and various Central Asian entities. But how could such a shift occur without the usual cartographic rigor of the 18th century? Cartographers of the era prized meticulous documentation, recorded their sources diligently, and detailed the rationale behind any amendments. However, in the case of Tartary, this protocol seems to vanish. How could such a significant region be erased without any apparent rationale or adjustment period? If the name Tartary piques your interest, you're not alone. Many have heard faint echoes of its existence. Others encounter it here for the first time. What happened after the disappearance of Tartary is what I refer to as an inheritance period. spanning roughly from 1780 to 1850, and it beckons us to look closer, to question more. Suddenly, across the globe, grandiose buildings with strikingly similar architectural styles began dotting the landscape. These were not humble structures, but monumental edifices of technological complexity. We're told it was the neoclassical revival, inspired by the Greek and Roman motifs, spreading its aesthetic from Europe to America, Russia, and into parts of Asia over just a few decades. Yet, could it truly have been that these structures simply emerged from the ground anew? Or had they been there long before, merely repurposed and rebranded? Consider San Francisco, newly prospering post-gold rush. How did it manifest opulent Beaux-Arts palaces, seemingly overnight? In Melbourne, a fledgling colonial settlement. How did exhibition halls that could rival Europe's greatest cathedrals come into existence? Chicago is said to have constructed an entire exposition city in just 2 years with 19th century means. The official explanation ties it to human progress, the Industrial Revolution, and colonial aspirations. But must we disregard the glaring omissions in this narrative? Where are the detailed records of their construction processes? Why do we see completed structures in photographs, but rarely the actual construction? Where are the accounts of the laborers, the supply chains, the raw materials recorded in tonnage, the logistical marvels that should have been documented? What we have are rather glossy dedication ceremonies, narratives penned well after the fact, and a surprisingly consistent storyline that doesn't quite add up to the logistical feat it's supposed to represent. This consistency implies something else. Perhaps not construction, but rather inheritance. What if the grand edifices we associate with the 1800s were merely adopted, not constructed by industrious hands of that era? Imagine the possibility that these majestic structures were already standing, waiting to be claimed by a society eager to declare them as the fruit of its own labor. Have you ever looked around your own city and detected these curious inconsistencies? I believe you'd find hints of such a past if you only paused to observe. During this journey of discovery, I can't help but consider an alternate narrative, an ancient civilization, perhaps known as Tartaria, spanning either the globe or a significant portion of it before the year 780. Could they have possessed the skill to erect what we now call classical architecture, infrastructure, so vast it featured prominently on maps of the time? The idea of a highly sophisticated civilization that maintained connectivity over continents is intriguing. What if this mighty civilization met its demise between 1780 and 1785? Was it a war, a natural upheaval, or a catastrophe beyond our current understanding that brought about such widespread devastation? Imagine a world shattered, its people either perished, displaced, or dispersed, leaving behind the skeletons of its once thriving cities. Fast forward to the period from 1785 to 1820, a time of inheritance rather than invention. Various powers, perhaps involved in the Russian expansion, European colonization, or the westward push in America, found themselves in possession of these deserted metropolises. They could have taken over, rebranded the structures as their own achievements, and spun tales of rapid construction with rudimentary tools as a testament to their supposed industriousness. Consider the possibility that from 1820 to 1900, history was rewritten. Encyclopedias may have been modified, cartography altered, and a new academic consensus meticulously constructed. The memory of Tartaria faded into obscurity, transformed from a civilization into a mere geographic reference. The classical architecture we admire today was reinterpreted as a byproduct of industrial innovation, rather than an inheritance from an earlier, advanced culture. The story solidified by 1900, and those who dared question it faced dismissal. Isn't it curious how the simultaneous emergence of similar architectural styles across the globe remains largely unexamined, as does the conspicuous absence of detailed construction records? Could it be that the explanation for these architectural wonders and the conspicuous gaps in our historical records lies in their discovery, not their construction? The uniformity across cultures becomes less of a mystery if observed as an inheritance from a shared source. The eagerness to establish official narratives, to lay claim to these cities, occurs because unoccupied wonders are up for grabs, aren't they? Take the dark day of May 19, 1780, as a focal point. The phenomenon wasn't confined to New England. Reports from Europe, Russia, and even the Far East describe similar events around that time. In 1783, the Laki eruption in Iceland blanketed Europe in what experts call dry fog. The subsequent years saw the Great Frost, widespread crop failures, and peculiar atmospheric occurrences like blood moons and abnormal cold spells. While the official accounts scatter these events into natural disasters, forest fires, and erratic weather patterns, all narrowly grouped in a mere 5-year stretch, we must ask, could there have been a single, colossal event behind it all? Could the darkening of the skies be attributed to something far beyond mere forest fires, perhaps evidence of a civilization's cataclysmic end, leaving behind only atmospheric traces of its demise? I want to start with a number. Consider 1783. Could the dry fog that swept across Europe in that year be more than volcanic remnants drifting in the wind? What if this obscuring veil was the residue of widespread calamity, a dark cloak drawn over a colossal downfall? Could the infamous years without summer be more than simple climatic oddities, but instead the chilling aftermath of a catastrophic collapse, not born from a singular volcanic eruption, nor isolated forest fires, but something far more devastating? Imagine an event of such magnitude that it could wipe a civilization like Tartaria off the map after 1780, leaving behind cities abandoned and silent, their impressive structures awaiting new tenants. Could such an occurrence demand a reevaluation of our historical narratives, especially regarding the architectural wonders that seem oddly inherited rather than built anew? There's an intriguing puzzle here. If Tartaria was indeed a sprawling civilization, what fate met its people? This wasn't a slow fading into oblivion, nor a story of conquest that took decades. It appears to be an outright and total disappearance. Maps from the 1770s proudly depict Tartaria, yet by the 1820s, its presence is entirely replaced by Russia, China, and various European colonies. The change occurred within a mere generation, yet no recorded wars, migrations, or tales of refugees mark this transition. Just a seamless replacement. How does one explain the complete erasure or dispersal of a workforce capable of constructing such global infrastructure? How does one erase their language, their written histories, their cultural imprint, only to have their creations claimed by emerging powers? And the rewriting of maps, the unified narrative across diverse empires, Russian, British, French, American, Chinese, stands unchallenged. Tartaria, we're told, was never more than a geographic name, devoid of significance. The silence surrounding this subject is louder than any shout. Where is the scholarly curiosity, the archaeological digs at Tartarian sites, the linguistic endeavors to trace remnants of their speech, the genetic research into population links? Instead, there's blanket consensus, immediate, unassailable, that Tartaria was of no consequence. What could motivate rival empires to jointly obliterate a civilization's historical records? What could they possibly gain? Unless perhaps the truth they suppress is far more unsettling. Let's revisit the ominous dark day with a renewed perspective. Its official attribution to forest fires serves a particular narrative, offering a harmless, localized explanation for an atmospheric anomaly. It's meant to reassure, to keep our imaginations tethered to the mundane. Yet, what if the evidence points to something grander? Accounts from that time depict the darkness as eerie. The air is strangely dense, with sounds of deep, distant rumblings, unaccompanied by storms. Animals reacted with instinctual dread, sensing a more profound disturbance than mere shadow. Could this infamous dark day have veiled not the glow of distant forest fires, but the telltale signs of civilization-scale annihilation? Picture the sight from above, a sprawling civilization in flames, its infrastructure crumbling, perhaps succumbing to technologies we hesitate to acknowledge. The atmospheric imprint of such an event would be vast, prolonged, unmistakable across the globe, particularly if Tartaria's reach was as extensive as suggested. And what better method to obscure that trace than attributing it to nature's whims? Fires, volcanoes, capricious weather, phenomena that demand no inquiry into human influence. Could it be that the dark day shines not as proof of Tartaria's existence, but rather as a witness to its hidden obliteration? I want to start with a number, 1780. Was it the year that marked the end of an era with the obliteration of Tartaria? The commonly accepted atmospheric causes, those events of smoke, fog, and natural disasters might not be entirely wrong, but they feel like an incomplete narrative. Could these explanations be a crafted perspective, a partial truth that obscures a far more significant story? Yes, the environmental disturbances occurred, but might they have been a result of deliberate actions on a scale we aren't meant to fathom for that period? I'm not here to offer definitive proof. The evidence remains elusive, fragmented, and seemingly hidden from view. Official historical accounts offer explanations for everything, often requiring acceptance of unlikely coincidences and seemingly miraculous construction timelines. But this is where my questions begin. How did Tartaria vanish from maps with such suddenness? Why is there no record of its gradual disappearance? What happened to its people? Why is there a noticeable lack of archaeological interest in investigating these mysteries? How do we explain the architectural similarities seen from San Francisco to St. Petersburg, attributed to cultures allegedly disconnected from one another? Why are construction photographs so rare? And why do the few that exist contradict established timelines? The 1780s witnessed a remarkable concentration of atmospheric events that demand explanation. And why was the terrifying Dark Day, which cast fear over an entire region, so quickly dismissed by history? Why do official narratives cling to natural causes, which seem to demand belief in a series of coincidences? And most intriguingly, why do we encounter resistance when attempting to explore these questions, encountering hostility toward the notion that our historical timeline might be incomplete? The more I dig, the more the accepted story appears as a construct itself, not necessarily a falsehood, but a careful assembly of selective truths, a narrative crafted to satiate curiosity without truly illuminating the past. The occurrence of the Dark Day is indisputable. Tartaria's appearance and abrupt disappearance from maps is recorded. The global uniformity of architecture, visible and measurable, stands before us. What's absent from the official chronicles is the linkage, the reasons, the methods. Could this absence be deliberate? My journey began seeking clarity on a darkened sky, but it revealed a shadowy epoch, a time when one civilization may have ended and another begun. When urban centers shifted, histories were rewritten, and questions ceased to be asked. Was Tartaria a unified empire, a loose alliance, a technologically advanced society, or simply a cultural region? The trail of evidence is too well cleansed to know for sure. Was there a collapse that took place in the 1780s? Was the Dark Day its last gasp? Did an atmospheric cataclysm obliterate it while European powers carved up its legacy? Perhaps the timeline supports this. Perhaps the silence, the inheritance of lands and buildings makes sense. Perhaps I'm interpreting